Story 1. I've never believed in haunted places. I thought fear was something people created when they were alone for too long. But that belief died the night I decided to hike the old Darwin Mountain Trail alone. The first mistake was ignoring the warning board near the start of the trail. It said, "Unmarked paths ahead, do not travel alone." I laughed at it. I had hiked tougher places before. What could possibly go wrong in a mountain range known mostly for its silence? By late afternoon, I was deep in the mountain pass, where the air grew thinner, colder, quieter. The wind carried only the sound of my footsteps and the crunch of small stones beneath my boots. I remember feeling proud of myself, until I heard it. A scream. It echoed faintly from somewhere ahead. At first I froze, thinking I'd imagined it. But then it came again, longer, sharper this time. It was the sound of someone in pain, maybe a woman, echoing through the narrow valley walls. My stomach twisted. I couldn't ignore it. Someone might be hurt. I started walking faster, following the sound. The trail began to vanish under a thick layer of mist creeping down the slopes. I pulled my jacket tighter as the cold wrapped around me. The scream came again, a little farther ahead. I shouted, "Hello? Are you okay?" No reply, only silence. I hurried forward, moving from rock to rock. Every time I thought I was close, the scream echoed again, always just a little farther. It was like whoever was crying out didn't want to be found, but wanted me to keep looking. After half an hour, I realized I had left the marked trail. The sun was sinking behind the mountain peaks, turning the valley orange and then gray. I tried using my GPS, but there was no signal. The deeper I went, the more the fog thickened around me, swallowing the landscape. Suddenly I heard something closer, a whisper behind me. "Help me!" I spun around, but no one was there, just the fog, curling over the rocks like smoke. My heart pounded. Maybe the sound was echoing weirdly off the stone walls. That had to be it. I forced myself to keep walking. Minutes turned into hours. The screams became softer, then louder, as if they were circling me. The valley felt endless. When night finally fell, I was completely lost. I found a small patch of flat ground and decided to rest for a bit. My flashlight flickered weakly and my water bottle was nearly empty. Then the mountain spoke. I don't know how else to describe it. The air filled with echoes, my own voice shouting, "Hello?" again and again, replaying from every direction. But the tone was different. My words came back deeper, sharper, filled with a strange anger. I covered my ears, but it didn't stop. "Who's there?" I yelled. The mountain replied, in my own voice, but twisted. "Who's there?" it mocked. My flashlight went out. I could only hear the wind and my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, from the thick fog ahead, I saw movement, a dark figure, standing still. "Hey!" I called out, trying to sound brave. "Do you need help?" It didn't move. I stepped closer, my boots scraping on the rocks. The figure looked human, tall, thin, but its arms hung unnaturally long. When I got within 20 feet, it faded into the fog like smoke dispersing in the air. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but then it appeared again, behind me. I turned sharply, nearly slipping on the icy ground. The figure stood there, closer now. I could see its face. It looked exactly like me. Every muscle in my body froze. My reflection stared back at me with hollow, dark eyes. Then it smiled, a twisted, hateful version of my own smile. The voice that came from its mouth was my own, but filled with fury. "Why did you follow me?" I stumbled backward, tripping over a rock. Panic filled my chest. "Stay away!" I shouted. The echo came again. "Stay away!" But from every direction, dozens of voices screaming at once, all in my tone. The mountain walls were alive with my own voice, repeating, twisting, mocking. I ran. I didn't know where to go, just away from that sound. The fog seemed to pull tighter around me, like the air itself wanted to trap me. My breaths came in sharp gasps as I pushed through the darkness. I could still hear the echoes chasing me, closer, louder, angrier. Then I tripped and fell into a shallow pit. My flashlight hit the ground and flickered back on, illuminating the wall in front of me. There were scratches all over the rocks, names carved into the stone, dozens of them. The last one was mine, my full name, etched deep and fresh. I stared in disbelief, feeling the cold crawl up my spine. Before I could move, the flashlight dimmed again. In the darkness, I heard a deep whisper behind me. "You finally found me." Hands, cold and strong, grabbed my shoulders. I screamed, kicking and thrashing, but the sound that came out wasn't mine anymore. The mountain took it, twisted it, and threw it back at me in 100 different voices. That was the last thing I remember before the light went out completely. Now, whenever hikers pass through the Darwin Mountains, they say they hear screams echoing through the valleys. They sound different every time, but one of them will always sound just like me. Story 2. They say mountains hold secrets, places where sunlight never reaches and sounds never escape. I used to laugh at ghost stories told by hikers, but that laughter died on the night we camped at Black Hollow Plateau. It was me, Daniel, and Chloe. We'd been friends since high school and decided to take one last hiking trip before winter. The trail to the plateau was steep, our boots crunching against loose stones, and the evening air was sharp with cold. By the time we reached the flat expanse at the top, the sun had dipped behind jagged peaks, and the sky was a sheet of silver under the moon. We set up camp near a small fire pit left by previous hikers. Chloe lit a fire, and its warm glow pushed away the chill. Everything felt peaceful, too peaceful, now that I think back. The silence was so complete, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. We ate, talked, and eventually lay back to watch the stars. That's when Daniel noticed movement below. "Hey, do you guys see that?" He pointed toward the slope leading down from the plateau. Far below, against the pale moonlight, dark shapes slid between the rocks. They moved without sound, no crunch of gravel, no snapping twigs, just shadows gliding like water. Chloe frowned. "Mountain goats, maybe?" I squinted. The forms were too large, too tall. They didn't move like animals. Some seemed to stand still while others drifted closer along the slope. Curiosity won over caution. Daniel grabbed his flashlight and pointed it at the nearest figure. The beam caught something. It froze instantly. No twitch, no blink, just stillness. "Okay, that's not an animal," I muttered. Chloe shined her flashlight too, catching more figures between the rocks. They all stopped moving, as if we'd paused a video. The only sound was the fire crackling behind us. Then, slowly, the shadows began creeping uphill. There was no sound, no heavy steps, no rustling, just silent climbing. Each figure moved in sync, gliding, not walking, toward us. Their shapes didn't shift with the light like normal shadows should. My stomach tightened with a deep, instinctive fear. "Pack up. Now," I said, my voice tight. We backed toward the campfire, flashlights sweeping in arcs to keep the shadows visible. But the more we lit them, the closer they came. There were at least 7 now, climbing in a wide spread, their outlines long and distorted under the moon. We reached the fire pit and froze. Every single shadow stood around it in a perfect circle, waiting. They weren't climbing anymore. They weren't hiding behind rocks. They were simply there, facing us, unmoving. "What the hell?" Daniel whispered. The fire popped loudly, sparks flying into the air, but the shadows didn't react. Their heads, or what I guessed were heads, slowly tilted toward us, as if curious. I wanted to run, but the plateau was surrounded by steep drops, except for the path they had climbed. To get away, we'd have to pass through them. Chloe's voice trembled. "They're not human, right?" Before I could answer, one of the shadows broke the stillness. It stepped forward, if you could call it a step. The motion was fluid, unnatural, like smoke rolling over glass. Daniel swung his flashlight beam straight at it. The shadow didn't freeze this time. Instead, the light passed through it, revealing faint lines like cracks inside its shape, glowing faintly as if lit from within. Then, every shadow moved. They began to close in, circling tighter around the fire. The cold hit us hard, as if the air itself had been drained of warmth. The flames shrank, dimming, even though Chloe frantically added wood. My breath came out in pale clouds, my hands numbing. "Run for the slope!" I hissed. We bolted toward the trail, flashlights bouncing wildly. But the shadows moved faster, much faster, cutting us off without touching the ground. Daniel swung his pack at one, but it passed through, the material tearing as if scraped by invisible claws. Chloe screamed and pointed. The circle around the fire was gone. The shadows were everywhere now, sliding across rock, wrapping around boulders, multiplying. Some towered twice our height, others hunched low. My legs felt heavy, my chest burning. Daniel took the lead, shouting for us to stay close. We ran down the slope, avoiding jagged rocks, barely keeping balance. Every few seconds, I looked back. They were following, not running, just gliding silently downhill after us, as if gravity meant nothing. Halfway down, my flashlight caught something carved into the rock wall. A ring of simple shapes, almost human silhouettes etched deep. I didn't have time to look closer, but one of the carvings. It looked like me. Daniel was ahead, Chloe right behind him. Then Chloe's scream ripped through the night. I turned. She was gone. Just gone. In her place stood one of the tall shadows, its crooked head tilted. I yelled her name and lunged forward, but Daniel grabbed my arm. "Don't! It'll take you too." His voice cracked with terror. The shadow, Chloe's shadow, slid toward us, its movements jerky now, like broken film. The faint glow inside it pulsed faster, almost like a heartbeat. "We need to move!" Daniel dragged me away, and we tore down the mountain. Somehow, we made it back to the marked trail by dawn. The sunlight crept over the peaks, and just like that, the shadows faded. My chest was heaving, my mind trying to accept what we'd just escaped. But Chloe didn't make it back. There was no trace of her. When rescue teams went up the plateau later, they found nothing unusual. No strange prints, no shadows. Just a freshly carved outline in the rock at the fire pit. Another silhouette added to the circle. This time, it looked exactly like her. Story 3. I've always loved hiking for the quiet, the feeling that the world slows down when you're surrounded by mountains. My partner Alex felt the same way. That's why we chose the old Renson Trail for our weekend trip. It was supposed to be safe, well-marked, and familiar. It wasn't. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see how the mountain moved. Not in a landslide, not in the way Earth shifts after a storm, but in a way that shouldn't be possible. The day had started clear and bright. We followed the winding trail through tall pines, the air smelling of damp soil and moss. After 3 hours, we stopped for a short rest in a small clearing. I remember leaning against a rock while Alex sipped water from his bottle. We weren't there for more than 10 minutes, but when we stood up again, something felt wrong. The trail in front of us seemed off. The bend that should have led us straight toward the ridge now curved sharply to the left. A tree that had been far in the distance 20 minutes ago was now towering right beside the path. Rocks were arranged differently too, smooth ones with moss, sitting where jagged boulders used to be. Alex frowned. Did we take the wrong turn somehow? No, I said softly, staring around. We didn't move. We laughed it off at first, telling ourselves maybe we just remembered things differently. We kept walking, hoping the trail would look normal again. But as we moved, the changes grew stranger. Trees seemed to lean in toward us, their branches stretching like fingers. The air felt heavier, the silence more complete, as if the only sounds allowed were the crunch of our boots. After an hour, we reached a section of trail that should have passed beside a stream. Instead, it now stretched uphill between rows of blackened tree stumps. It didn't make sense. Alex pulled out his GPS. It showed us on the correct path, yet neither of us had ever seen this part of the mountain before. We pressed on, clinging to the hope this weird detour would eventually loop us back. The sun began to drop lower, casting long shadows across the trail. My chest grew tight with unease, but turning back didn't seem necessary. Yet. Then, after 2 more hours, we stopped dead in our tracks. Before us was not the familiar ridge we'd been aiming for, but a sheer cliff. The drop was so steep I couldn't see the bottom through the mist. Jagged rocks jutted out like teeth at the edge. This isn't right," Alex whispered. "There's no cliff on the Renson Trail." We decided to turn back. We'd retrace our steps to the clearing and figure out where we had gone wrong. But within minutes of walking, we realized something terrifying. The path behind us was gone. In its place was dense forest. Thick trunks blocked the way we had just come, and tangled branches wove together like a wall. I spun around. No, we came through here. This can't be." Alex slammed his hand against a tree. "It's like the mountain changed." The branches overhead began to sway, though there was no wind. The sound was low, like the rustle of fabric. I felt a pressure in my ears, the kind you get before a storm. We tried pushing through the trees, breaking branches, but the forest seemed endless. No matter what direction we turned, the cliff and the wall of trees were both there, always too close, like we were trapped in a shrinking space. Alex's breathing grew fast. "It's moving." I didn't want to believe him, but I saw it too. Trees sliding, roots twisting, rocks rolling silently into new places when we looked away. The path didn't just vanish, it was rearranging itself piece by piece, closing in around us. At one point, I looked down and saw the ground itself shifting. A patch of grass rippled, and stones sunk into the soil like they were swallowed. We called for help, our voices echoing strangely, bouncing back softer than we expected. Alex shouted again, but his voice came back wrong, slightly delayed, slightly altered, as if something in the mountain was repeating him. We made our way back to the cliff edge, hoping to see some landmark that could guide us. But the mist had thickened into a wall, and deep gray shapes moved within it. Not clouds, not animals, but towering forms too far away to make out. The temperature dropped fast. My fingers were stiff, my breath fogged with each exhale. I realized the sun had disappeared entirely. No sunset, no fading light, just a sudden dull gray sky. "Stay close," Alex said, gripping my hand as we searched for any break in the forest wall. But every gap just led to another curve of twisted branches and shifting rocks. Hours passed until my legs burned and my throat felt raw. The mountain was still moving. Sometimes I'd glance behind us and see new trees where open space had been seconds ago. Sometimes the cliff seemed closer than before, as if it was slowly advancing toward us. Alex stopped suddenly. He pointed to a faint opening in the forest ahead. "There!" We ran. The opening narrowed, branches clawing at our arms. And then, we were back in the clearing where we had first rested. Only now, it was different. The rock I had leaned on was gone. The ground was covered in dark leaves that hadn't been there before. And in the center, carved into the soil, was a perfect circle. Inside it, 2 sets of footprints. Ours. Except they led into the circle, but no prints came out. Story 4. I never believed that mountains could remember things, but after that night, I'm convinced some places breathe, silently, waiting for someone foolish enough to listen. I was that fool. It started when I decided to cross Ridgepoint Pass alone. I'd been hiking solo for years and thought I'd seen it all: storms, cliffs, even wild animals. Nothing scared me easily. That changed the moment I found the cabin. The weather had turned ugly before sunset. A freezing wind howled through the rocks, and thick fog rolled down from the peaks, wrapping the whole ridge in white. My GPS had lost signal hours ago, and I was hungry, cold, and running out of light. That's when I saw it, a shape in the fog, about 50 meters ahead. As I got closer, it became clearer. A small wooden cabin sitting strangely crooked at the edge of the trail. No cabin was marked on any map I'd studied. At first, I thought it was some kind of ranger shack, maybe built decades ago. But as I approached, a deep unease sank into me. The logs were dark and damp, the windows covered in grime from seasons of neglect. There was no smoke from the chimney, no footprints or paths. Like it had been waiting, hidden, for someone to wander too far. Still, I was exhausted and half frozen. I told myself it was shelter, nothing else. The door creaked open with one push. Inside, it was dim, lit only by gray light filtering through cracks in the wood. My first step echoed in the eerie stillness. The air was thick with dust and something else, something faint but sharp like old blood. Then I noticed the carvings. Every inch of the cabin's wooden walls was covered in names, hundreds of them. Some were faint and worn down, others freshly cut, so clean I could see wood shavings still clinging to the edges. I ran my fingers over one name, Mason, and felt a chill crawl up my spine. On a small table near the wall, there was a single piece of paper pinned with a nail. The handwriting was rough, hurried. "If you're here, you've heard them. Keep them out tonight." I couldn't move for a good minute. The note didn't make sense. Heard who? I tried convincing myself it was a prank left by a previous hiker, but as the last bit of daylight slipped away, I started hearing it. Whispers. At first, it sounded like the wind, long sighs brushing across the cabin walls. Then it changed. The whispers became sharper, higher, almost like faint laughter buried deep in the fog. I tried to ignore it, rubbing my hands together for warmth. There was an old fireplace, but no wood inside. I sat against the wall, pulling my jacket tight, the carvings pressing coldly against my back. Then, a low thump came from outside. Something, or someone, was moving around the cabin. I held my breath. The sounds circled the building slowly, crunching over frost-covered ground. There was more whispering now, clearer this time, dozens of voices murmuring at once, but I couldn't make out the words. I crawled quietly toward the nearest window and wiped a circle through the grime with my sleeve. My flashlight beam barely pierced the fog. For a moment, all I saw was darkness. Then, movement, small shapes flickering between trees. I told myself it was just shadows. That's when the first scratch came. It was light at first, like fingernails brushing the wood. Then it grew louder, longer, spreading along the wall like something clawing gently. Testing. I stumbled back, my chest tight. The note's words came screaming into my mind, "Keep them out tonight." I bolted to the door and jammed it with a rusty chair. My heart was pounding hard enough to shake my vision. The scratching grew faster, now coming from multiple sides of the cabin. I could hear whispers just outside, voices whispering in broken patterns, like a dozen people trying to speak through static. Then came the grips. Hands, pale and bony, slammed against the window glass. I gasped, stumbling backward. The fingers were long, skin stretched too tightly over bone, leaving smears across the glass. Faces pressed against the window next. Gray, grinning, teeth faintly visible even in the dark. I dared to peek through again and nearly screamed. There weren't just a few of them. There were dozens, all crawling from the fog on hands and knees, dragging themselves toward the cabin. Their faces twisted into eerie smiles, their empty eyes locked on the door. The walls shivered as the scratching turned to pounding. The voices outside grew louder, almost rhythmic. It sounded like they were chanting, humming a single deep tone that rattled my ribs. I grabbed my flashlight and shone it around desperately, looking for something to block the windows. That's when I saw the names again. some glowing faintly under the beam. And then I noticed one name at the very bottom, freshly carved, still damp. Ben. My name. My throat went dry. I hadn't carved that. The humming outside stopped. Complete silence. I took one step back, then another. That's when I heard it. A single whisper from behind me. You're inside now. I turned slowly. In the corner near the table stood a dark figure, tall and motionless. Its face was pale, its grin wide and wrong. Its fingers brushed the cabin wall, carving lines with slow precision. I ran for the door, but the handle burst open before I reached it. The wind hit me first, icy and sharp. Then came the hands. They reached through the opening, clawing at my jacket, gripping me, pulling me down as dozens of faces pressed through the doorway, all still smiling. The last thing I saw before I blacked out was that figure standing over me, the knife scratching my name into the wood again. Deeper, sharper, and longer this time. Story 5. I've always loved the quiet of the mountains, the way the wind hums through the trees and streams sing as they rush downhill. I thought I knew every sound that nature could make. I was wrong. Alex and I had been hiking for 6 hours that day, climbing through narrow trails and rocky slopes on Mount Greystar. The sun was beginning its slow descent, and we were running low on water. That's when we found it, a narrow mountain stream cutting through jagged stone, crystal clear under the fading light. The sound was different from the other streams we'd passed. It wasn't the soft rush of water over pebbles. It was thinner, sharper, almost like dozens of whispers tangled together. Alex knelt beside the stream and dipped his bottle. You hear that? I crouched next to him. At first I thought it was just the wind playing tricks through the canyon walls. But as my ear got closer to the water, my stomach tightened. The stream wasn't rushing, it was talking. I could hear faint voices layered over each other, brushing against the surface of the water like breath through glass. What the hell? Alex whispered. We froze, listening. The voices grew clearer the longer we stayed. At first, they sounded like fragments of sentences, words broken apart by the bubbling surface. Then, slowly, they formed feelings, soft crying, sobs muffled by the current. Alex's eyes widened. It's saying something. Listen. I leaned closer until my forehead almost touched the water. Help. The word was distant at first. Then another voice followed, shaky, pleading. Let us out. The stream seemed to pull us in deeper, the babbling turning into dozens of words, each stranger than the last. They know your name, one whisper murmured. And then, clear as a scream, I heard my own name ripple through the water. I jerked back, my heartbeat slamming against my ribs. Alex, it said my name. He gave me a stiff nod. It said mine too. We both stared into the water now, breaths growing shallow. The current swirled faster, bubbles breaking to reveal flickers of pale movement underneath. At first, I thought it was fish, but fish don't have human hands. From beneath the dark stones, something rose, slow, steady movements like weeds swaying in deep water. But they weren't weeds, they were arms. Pale, thin arms ending in trembling fingers that reached upward toward the surface. Alex's bottle slipped from his hand, floating down the stream as he backed away. We should go, now. I was frozen, unable to look away as the figures rose higher. I could see faces now, warped and wretched, eyes wide and dark like deep caves, mouths opening but never breaking the water's surface. Their expressions were twisted with desperation. They were reaching for us, not in anger but in a frantic need, as if touching us meant escape. The crying grew louder, mixing with jagged whispers. Pull us out! They took us! Don't leave! Alex grabbed my arm so tight it hurt. We're leaving! But before I could stand, one of the hands broke the surface. It was ice cold, dripping, gripping my wrist with a strength that didn't match its fragile bones. I screamed, stumbling backward. The hand slid under my sleeve, nails digging into my skin. Alex kicked at the water, the ripple distorted, hands flinching back, but not retreating. More were coming up now, at least 7 pairs of them stretching toward the bank. We stumbled away, trying to climb up the rocks beside the stream, but the voices followed, louder, sharper, filling our heads. "They'll find you. You'll drink us. We'll be inside." The words spun wildly, twisting my thoughts until my balance faltered. Every sound from the water seemed to claw at me, like the stream itself wanted to pull us back. Alex shouted over them, "Don't listen! Keep moving!" We ran alongside the bank, away from the hands, our boots slipping dangerously close to the edge. The water no longer sounded like crying. It was shrieking now, dozens of voices roaring in desperation. At one point I looked down. The water had darkened, turning almost black. The faces were clearer now, unblinking, following our movement like predators tracking prey. A rock slid under my foot, and I tumbled forward, catching myself just before falling in. That's when I saw it. The stream wasn't ending anywhere. It looped ahead, disappearing into the forest in unnatural curves, always keeping pace with us, like it was following. When we finally broke away from the bank, the voices dulled, but the whispers lingered. Every so often, I could hear my name drift faintly from behind, tangled with Alex's. We didn't stop running until we reached the marked trail again, gasping for air. Neither of us spoke for minutes, afraid our voices might carry back toward the stream. I haven't been back to Mount Greystar, but I heard from another hiker last month. He said he found a stream high in those mountains. He said it whispered his name too. He didn't carry water home after that trip. Story 6. I've always looked out for my sister, Mia. She's younger by 8 years, full of energy, and never afraid to explore. But there are places in the mountains where bravery means nothing, places where the world itself changes. I learned that the hard way. We were halfway up Blackthorn Peak, a slope known for its morning mist. The climb had been tiring but calm, the trail winding between patches of moss and slick rock. The fog was thin at first, low to the ground, harmless looking, but soon it thickened, curling upward in heavy white swirls until it seemed to breathe. "Mia, stay close," I called, watching her hop from one rock to another ahead of me. She laughed, turning back for just a second before stepping forward into the thicker fog. That was the last normal thing that happened. She vanished in 3 steps. The white swallowed her completely. I quickened my pace, climbing over the rocks. "Mia?" My voice felt too quiet against the dense silence. No answer. I called again, louder. Still nothing. My stomach tightened, panic pushing into my chest. I broke into a run, moving into the fog where she'd gone. The trail was damp under my boots, the air clawing at my skin with cold fingers. But when I reached the spot, she wasn't there. No movement. No sound except a faint drip somewhere far downhill. Just damp ground and a wall of mist. I spun in every direction, my breath coming fast. "Mia, where are you?" Then I heard it, her voice faint, afraid. But it wasn't ahead, it was far behind me. Michael? The sound rooted me to the spot. My mind screamed at me that it wasn't possible. She'd gone forward, not back. I turned slowly, my boots scraping on wet stone. Through the thinning fog behind me, I saw her. She was standing still about 20 meters away, completely alone, the mist curling around her like she'd been waiting there for hours. Only something was wrong. Her arms hung stiffly at her sides, but not in a normal way. They jerked slightly every few seconds, as if her body was adjusting in sharp, unnatural movements. Her head tilted, too far, and then snapped back upright. I stepped forward, every instinct screaming to reach her, to grab her. "You okay?" I barely got the words out before she smiled. It wasn't her smile. Mia's normal grin was warm, quick, full of life. This smile was wrong. Her lips stretched too far, pulling up at the corners in a motion that looked forced, almost mechanical. Her teeth were visible, every single one, perfectly white against her pale face. Mia. She took a step forward, slow and jerky, like her legs were being dragged rather than used. The mist swirled tighter at her feet. I backed up instinctively, my mind torn between running and helping. "What happened?" I asked, almost whispering. Her head tilted again, and her mouth opened just slightly. Her voice came out weak, thready, but it was clear. "You shouldn't be here." The tone didn't match her words. Her voice sounded empty, almost fluttering, like it was trying to break apart before it reached me. Then she started walking faster. Each step was stiff, the movement of her knees unnatural. The fog behind her grew denser, pressing forward as though it was following her. I couldn't move. My legs felt heavy, knees locked. My chest tightened as she got closer. I wanted to believe she was hurt and needed help, but everything about her movement screamed wrong. Halfway between us, she stopped. Her smile widened further, her head tilting so far I thought it might snap. Her eyes locked on mine, unblinking. "Mia?" Her voice came again, but this time it wasn't distant. It was like she was speaking from inside my head, brushing against my thoughts. "It's not safe." The ground beneath her feet began to darken, dampness spreading outward like ink in paper. The mist swallowed her legs, creeping upward toward her waist. "Mia, move!" I shouted, rushing forward until she jerked suddenly, stepping back into the fog. In seconds, the white devoured her. I stood there, shaking, listening. Silence. Then, movement behind me again. I turned, and there she was, closer than before, maybe 10 meters away this time. Same jerky movements, same stretched smile. Only now her eyes weren't just pale, they were completely white. She raised one hand toward me, palm outward, fingers trembling. "You shouldn't have followed me." Something shifted in the mist around her. Shapes, tall, uneven, glided just behind her shoulders. I couldn't make them out, but they were moving closer, as if the fog itself carried them. I ran. My boots slid on the wet rock, heart pounding so hard I couldn't hear the dripping anymore. I didn't stop until I reached the lower trail, where the fog thinned enough that sunlight broke through in strips. When I looked back up toward the ridge, there was no movement, no voice, just dead, pale mist curling over the rocks. I haven't seen Mia since. Some say she's still up there, waiting. And if you go on Blackthorn Peak early enough, in the heavy morning fog, you might hear her voice calling your name. But if you do, don't answer. For more stories like this, share and subscribe, Goofy Horror.